This is the Hello World podcast, where we talk about habits of success, habits of excellence, entrepreneurship, leadership, learning and development, and outlook that will help us succeed through life. This is Louis Banta, CEO and Chief Trainer of Learning Just Made Better, or LJMB. This is episode 14, and we'll talk about L leadership. Our topic is leadership in a time of crisis. Our guest in today's episode has more than 20 years of experience in leadership roles in companies like Colgate-Palmolive Philippines in Russia, Coca-Cola, GSK, and most recently with Mundipharma as country manager. His passion is developing people and delivering successful business results, whether in a slow growth, fast growth, or a turnaround setting. I think the last one is very applicable to talking about crisis, not just with the COVID crisis, but with any business crisis. In his most recent role in Mundipharma, our guest and his team were able to dramatically turn around the business, with the Philippine company awarded as the best large affiliate in Mundipharma, with Mundipharma Philippines also being named as one of the best companies to work for in the Philippines by HR Asia magazine. Our guest for today to talk about leadership in a time of crisis, Mr. Ian Santos.
Hello, world.
Welcome, Ian, to the Hello World podcast. And thank you again for saying yes, even with a short notice. And yes, Hello World is now watching Mr. Ian Santos. This is to be uploaded in YouTube and will also be available in Spotify and Apple. Okay? And for our community members, Ian and I have been recently connected in the past 2 to 3 months lang yata, brother, no? I'll call you bro,
Yeah.
bro, in
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Wow. LinkedIn is really bustling with so much activity and so much connection. No? And talking about LinkedIn first, Ian, how long have you been that active in LinkedIn? I know that you were one of the Philippines top 100 in LinkedIn.
Yeah. Before that, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me here, Louis. No, and as a fellow trainer, I watched some of your online training videos, and I'm very impressed. No, but I'm most impressed about how you've been managing, I would say, your team and your organization throughout this pandemic. So, congratulations to you and the team. Um, how long have I been using LinkedIn? Probably more than 10 years now. And in the past, I just use LinkedIn so I can learn from others, no? From other experts. And it really helped me a lot in my leadership journey. And that's why in the past, I would say past 2, 3 years, I've been trying to give back by also sharing what I know. And that's really my passion. I share what I know on LinkedIn, on also offline whenever I can. So and LinkedIn, has been very, very. I would say it's a very good platform for people to know other people and also to share learnings and also to learn from others.
And same as you, Ian, I've been in LinkedIn since 2009, but only used it for picking people, using the talent pool available in LinkedIn. And to our community members, it's only this year, and because of the pandemic, that I've also been forced to go back to LinkedIn. Initially, to
Right.
look for new clients, and I saw several people. One of those which really whose presence really affected me and impacted me is Ian, because of his powerful posts, no, on inspiration, on leadership, on people management. Sinusundan po talaga ang mga posts ni Ian. And as I mentioned, he's also been nominated or been part of the top 100 Filipinos to follow in LinkedIn. So that's how bro Ian and I got connected. And now we're talking about leadership in a time of crisis. And Ian, it has been an extended pandemic. We may not have anticipated that it will reach 6 months. We are now past 6 months since the
Right.
lockdown in the Philippines. And to
Right.
put the, again, remind people of the context, businesses have closed, a lot of businesses are affected. Those who are existing and still standing, their sales revenue generation teams now are really struggling. Crisis is really around us. Best topic to talk about, especially for our leaders who are listening to us. How should a leader behave? You've been in several roles. We've introduced you to our listeners. You've been in a top management role for quite some time. How should a leader behave during crisis as compared to when there is no crisis?
Yeah, I think it's our topic today is very relevant. No? I was telling you, Louie, nga tamang-tama, no? Marami talagang uh, nangyayaring kakaiba this year. No? Even for leaders like ourselves, no, I believe this is probably the hardest, if not the most challenging, one of the most challenging years we've ever encountered. No matter what organization we belong to, no.
Kahit
So
anong
so
industriya, no?
ka-
Affected talaga, no?
I think kahit anong industriya, iba-ibang levels lang eh. Ika nga,
Hmm.
we're all in the same storm, pero different boats lang siguro. Di ba? Parang
Correct.
ganon. Some are more stable, some are not really stable. But I think for leaders like us and to those leaders who are listening or watching, siguro first thing that comes to my mind is think about a storm, no? You're out in the sea, right? No, it's chaos all over. And there's a saying, no, you have to be an island of calm, ika nga, in a sea of chaos.
Mhm.
Kasi your people are looking at you, right? I mean, tita nila, ano ba ginagawa ng boss ko? Nagpapanik ba siya? Relax lang ba siya? Cool lang ba siya? So we have to provide stability in a way, no? And being the leader, we need to walk the talk, right? Provide our people direction. So one is being calm, stable, but also being sort of like a lighthouse na provide them ano ba yung direction natin. What do we need? What should we prioritize, right? I mean, there's a lot of time right now, so to speak, in a work from home setting. But if you're doing things that are not relevant, sayang naman yung oras. So as
Mhm.
leaders, I think we need to, help people plan, organize, and prioritize things. That's number one. Uh, in a crisis, I also think that leaders are expected and must communicate constantly. Kasi people are looking for news. Ano ba nangyayari? May trabaho pa ba ako bukas? Ang kumpanya ba yan magsasara na, di ba?
Mhm.
So we need to always communicate, but be also simplify din natin, huwag masyadong complicated because people are now getting information overload from all different channels, right? So
Agree,
we need to
agree.
be very simple and direct, but also consistent and constant with our communication.
Mhm.
And I guess last on my mind would be, and I always say this in my post, no, may hashtag nga ako dyan eh, we need to be inspirational. We need to motivate our teams, especially during a crisis, right? We need to be dealers of hope as leaders. Kasi pag nakita nila yung leader, nawawala ng pag-asa, eh paano pa kaya sila? So I think we need to keep that in mind during times of crisis such as this.
I picked up the 4 points there, the leader, and you gave us very powerful analogies, no? An island of calm in a sea of chaos. And you also mentioned dealer of hope, no? Ang ganda nun, no? Providing people directions, being able to walk the talk, communicating, and you gave us two qualifiers of great communication during crisis, communicating constantly but at the same time simplifying things. And the last one, the last in the 4 tips is be inspirational. Once again, quoting that dealer of hope. Ganda, no? Dealer kasi, you are you're the conduit, no? Between the
Right,
source of hope to those who really need it, no? And if I
right.
may just ask, how did you lead your team at the onset of this crisis? No? Just got interested there. The lockdown announcement really surprised us, shocked us. A week before that, walang pinag-uusapang lockdown. And if
Right.
I remember it so well, It was a
Right.
series of daily events, no? No? Bro, yung Sabado na yung BGC-based employee was, yan yung unang-una, no? BGC-based employee of a known company contracted COVID. That following Monday, in my case, my client started to back out of planned engagement. Sabi ko, anong nangyayari? And then Thursday, the president said, on Monday, it's on a lockdown. How did these tips that you gave, how did you, just display it and show it when during that early onset of the lockdown and crisis?
Yeah, so I think no, kasi lahat naman tayo human, no. So I have to admit I also sort of in a way got kasi this is the first time this thing happened, right? And I think as leaders we also need to accept and be aware and realize that we don't have all the answers. And that's where the power of the team comes in, ano. So what I did was I immediately called for a meeting with my leadership team, ask them for their inputs, how they're feeling, what they think we should be doing. And of course, as the leader, I have to decide finally what to do. But I think it's very important that what we did was we gathered everyone's opinion and came up with a sort of, I would say, a consensus on what to do next. But the important thing there is we have to act fast. No? So for example, uh, nung nalaman namin na lockdown na, hindi na pwede puntahan ng mga customers, sa mga doctors, we already planned, okay, anong gagawin natin sa mga tao natin? Let's already start planning what they're gonna do at home. Because they're not gonna talk to doctors, but maybe we can do training, right? So things like that. Or maybe they could prepare, product knowledge, study more about product knowledge. So basically, we had our people in mind what they need to be doing in order to keep themselves ready and in order to help the company while this crisis is ongoing. And we also plan for the worst scenario. We were already thinking, paano pag maging 3 months to o 6 months, ano gagawin natin? We didn't have the answers yet, but we already started, brainstorming what to do. Kumbaga, and that's what we usually do naman kahit wala pang crisis, Louie. Like kami may plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E pa nga eh. Because we want to be ready whatever happens. So I think very important, number one, gather your team, get their opinion, and lead with a consensus. But also be decisive kasi sometimes may mga may mga two camps. Sometimes you have to put your foot down kahit di masaya lahat. But you have to think of what's best for everybody. Then you have to decide.
And at times, you really cannot achieve consensus, no? Especially
Correct.
if there are two opposing camps. That's where the
Correct.
role to our community members, that's where the role of Ian, country manager or top management, it's really lonely at the top that sabi
Very
nga nila,
lonely.
diba? The
During
box
crisis,
stops at you and that you
yeah.
really have to make that decision. I'd like to go back to what you said earlier. You had plan A, you had plan B, you had plan C. But also you mentioned earlier, nobody was ready for something as complicated and as big as this. So meron kayong plan A, plan B, plan C. Pero truth be told, nagulat ba talaga? Or did you say, meron kaming baon dyan for the COVID crisis? How was your team back then?
No, we didn't really know how this would pan out. Siguro I would say yung plano namin hanggang 2 to 3 months lang, max. Sabi namin, worst scenario na siguro yan, 3 months. We would have never thought this will last this long. And it's gonna last until probably next year pa. So, that's where I guess yung agility mo as a leader and as a team comes into play. No? You have to be ready to accept the new reality, whether it's very hard or not, and think about solutions. Kumbaga, I always try to preach, let's not be problem focused, let's be solutions focused. Kasi mas positive yun eh. And yung energy ng people, mas maganda pag iniisip mo ano ba yung gagawin yung solution. Kaysa yung, ang laki ng problema natin, ano gagawin natin ngayon. Parang, always be optimistic, but at the same time, realistic. So, no, we did not realize it's gonna be this bad. And as a leader, you always have to keep on reviewing your plans and changing along the way, sabi nga, no? You cannot just have a plan and then execute it 100%. That is not the way the world, works, no? Especially during a crisis.
You got me curious there. You said you prepared for 3 months, similar to our case, no? I was looking at March, April, May. And then sabi natin, perhaps business activity will come back ng June, July, August, no? Very hopeful tayo niyan, ano? And without going to the details, of course it's confidential, but broad strokes lang. How did
Yeah.
you lead the revisiting, and what basic changes happened with the plans March, April, May, and then June, July, August, if there were such changes?
Yeah, alam naman natin na sa any business, 'di ba? Ang talagang importante is ano ba magiging benta natin, 'di ba? So, we tried to project kasi we already saw some signs eh. First 2 to 3 months, alam mo na yung medyo bumabagsak na negosyo na produkto mo. Aning medyo stable pa. And you try to study ano pa yung pwede mong pagandahin yung benta with ample support, no? So having said that, we looked at our budgets, no? Cut cost muna tayo sa ganitong gastos. For example, it is not going to help the sales anyway. But maybe we can channel some of the money over here, right? I remember, pag medyo yung third month na namin, we were talking about, do we actually need this big of an office? And I remember one of your latest posts was, you have to bite the bullet. We don't really need this big of an office. People are working productively at home. So we actually plan to cut our office in half in terms of the space because sayang eh. So really looking at the budgets, the costs, but also trying to look at saan ka ba pwedeng makabawi pa sa benta. But I think one of the key principles, at least I had as a leader then, was let's try to save jobs as much as we could. Sa akin, yun ang huling-huli kong tatanggalin hanggat kaya pa. So, of course, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you have to make a difficult decision along the way. But sa akin, sabi ko sa team ko, let's punta tas parang, ano natin yan, worst scenario na yan. Let's cut where we can. Sa huli na yung mga tao pag talagang di kaya.
But it's still on the table, no? Bro,
yes.
No? It's still on the table.
Yes.
Maybe the last card that we're going to play. No?
That's right.
Okay. And to, again, addressing our community members, whether you listen to the podcast or you watch the YouTube version of this one, now, kanina, sinasabi ni Ian, direction, communication, inspiration. But we're now talking of financials as well as another aspect that leaders need to manage in times of crisis. Hindi lang puso, no? Puso is important, but you also here at the top level, we take a look at how we will make sure that the business survives. So sana po ma-appreciate lang natin that when top management makes certain decisions, and the phrase, di ba bro, yung for the cost cutting at cost reduction, allergic na allergic ang mga tao dyan. Diba?
Exactly. Oo.
Pero dapat maintindihan natin ngayon na it's a difficult decision that top management, your managers are doing just to be able to save jobs. Just like how Ian put it. Let's save on everything else so that we can keep as much as possible jobs. No? And this is where finance really becomes important. Resiliency of the organization. Benta, sinabi ni Brother Ian. Benta, gastos. Dadagdag ko bro yung cash flow, yung yung collections at saka yung cash flow. Maganda nga ang benta, pero pag hindi pumapasok, sabi nga natin, a sale is not a sale until it is collected.
That's right. And I think you brought up a very good point. I failed to mention it, but nagkaroon kami ng collection issues din. I think as other companies would have. Kasi remember, nawala ng trabaho mga tao. So siyempre yung disposable income ng mga tao bumagsak din, di ba? So we had challenges also collecting. So you're right. How do you now manage your cash flow needs? Di ba? You have to still pay rent, pay salaries. I think number one is pay salaries. How do you now manage that? So it's one of the key challenges of a leader during a crisis situation.
Anything that you can share as far as the thought process is concerned, bro? Because leading in crisis, I like the direction, communication, and inspiration. But behind the scenes, people may not see these decisions. Looking at the numbers and then looking at where we can cut, and then there's that heart factor, no? Can you just let us into how's Ian's mind during those times when you were about to make a decision?
Yeah, so ako talaga kasi, Louis, even in my previous jobs, I'm very much focused on people. Sabi nga nila, and I read it in one of the post of one of our LinkedIn content providers these past days. People talk about customer experience very important, which is it's really important. But companies, organizations need to talk about employee experience first. Because at the end of the day, who brings in the business? It's not the products, it's the people, di ba? Selling the products. So sa akin, ang thought process ko lagi pag crisis situations, of course, what's going to happen to the people? How can I save them? But also, how can I manage to save the business at the same time? So it's always dual, no? I know probably some other leaders who think about business first before people, or people first before business. But for me, my thought process is how can I balance this properly with the expectations of my regional bosses for my top line and bottom line profitability, but also my operational expenses. How can I continue with this kind of organization, keep on paying salaries, and at the same time keep people engaged?
Mhm.
So ang dami, no? Parang people look at leaders as, wow, they have a nice position, they have a nice car, good salary, I guess. But they don't, to your point, no, and I'm sure ikaw ganun din eh. You're managing, you're a CEO of your company. You're also doing the training, but yung daming sabay-sabay nasa utak mo, no? It's very important for leaders during a time of crisis to write down their thoughts, to write down what's on their mind. Because it's easy to think about a lot of things, but it's hard to decide what to prioritize if you don't put it down on writing. Put it down, write it down, and then you organize it based on urgency and important. Alam mo yung urgent, important grid, right? And then what's gonna be the impact if I decide this and this and this? Put it on paper. Kasi if you don't put it on paper, you might miss something. So sometimes you just scribble what the first thing that comes to your mind. Tsaka mo organize, basta sulat mo na lang muna. And it helps me at least organize my thoughts and my decision making.
These are great practical tips, which means that you can actually apply it after listening to this. No, there's something bothering you, overwhelming you, regardless of what crisis. Write it down. Sabi ni Ian, no? And then you have been refreshed of the Eisenhower time management grid, di ba? Yung urgency and totoo yan, bro, kasi alam mo nung nag-lockdown, no? We were settling down in terms of work from home setup. We've never done work from home. A lot of companies, I presume,
Right.
it's also the same in your case. No?
Right.
Work from home dati sa atin, pag may sakit ka, you're not feeling well, right? You can say work from home ako, no? You're taking in emails, but nobody's really ready for this 5-day, 8 hours per day work from home setup. Pero
At least
just to
8
share,
hours.
at least, correct, thank you for qualifying. Naging 10, naging 11, naging 12. No? That's now a concern, no? That the
Yeah.
blurred lines between work and life has happened. And just to
Right.
share, during the first 2 weeks, when all of our businesses were wiped out, our engagements were wiped out, Ian, I was watching Netflix at night. Sabi ko, parang yun ang naging outlet ko. Sabi ko, I've never watched Netflix on a weekday or a weeknight. Sabi ko, what is going on? So I started writing. So what Ian is saying is true. When you're overwhelmed, get a piece of paper and pen. You have your tablets, you have your digital notebooks. Put all of your thoughts there, and all of a sudden, when you look at everything, it will make sense to you on how you will attack it. Diba?
Right. Right. And let me build on the Netflix story
Go ahead.
na sinabi mo, no. As leaders, no, sometimes we deprive ourselves of time for ourselves. Let's not be yung parang nakukonsensya ka ba yung Netflix ako dapat may akong ginagawa. Actually, for you to survive a crisis as a leader, you need to take care of yourself mentally and physically. If it's watching Netflix that relaxes you, listening to Spotify, going on a jog or biking, whatever, you need to take care of yourself. Because if you don't, how can you take care of your organization, diba? I know it's simple to say, hard to do. But if we don't do it, if we don't get enough sleep, 7 to 8 hours, sabi ng mga experts, we're gonna be, we're gonna be hot-tempered because of lack of sleep. We're not gonna be able to make the right decisions every day. Our people are gonna see us as very agitated, and it's gonna infect them. Whatever they see in a leader infects people. Eh. So we need to be very intentional, very mindful of how we come across our people. take care of yourself before you can take care of others.
Connected yung sinasabi ni Ian dun sa mga tips, no? How can you provide direction if you don't have it? How can you communicate constantly and in a simple manner? How can you be inspirational if you do not have it? And correct, bro, tama ka. You cannot give what you do not have.
Yeah.
So to our leaders in the room, yes, the burden is on their shoulders. Accepted naman na natin yun. Dapat accepted mo yun if you're a leader. But self-care, as mentioned by Ian, is important. Baka nakatulong nga yung 2 weeks of Netflix ko eh.
Oh, no.
Because you're incubating ideas in your head while watching things.
And you know, just to share, when I watch Netflix, I look for inspirational, motivational films. Because leaders also need to be inspired and motivated. We have to inspire and motivate ourselves a lot of times, di ba?
Tama yung sinabi mo, bro. Because at the top level, especially at your level, there might be nobody else who will motivate you or pat you on the back. You
Correct.
talked about regional bosses, but at the level of senior management, hindi na kasi expected yan na you don't need a pat on the back. You need to have
Correct.
that ability to see that you're really doing well. Sabi nga, leadership is a thankless job, bro, di ba?
Agree, fully agree, especially during a crisis.
But if you are listening and you are middle management or if you're an employee, please do say thank you. Appreciate nyo rin yung mga bossing ninyo. Di ba? Kasi nga, di ba? Kasi
Agree.
while they do not
Agree.
expect it, and it's not your obligation to do that. Right now, you may not know it. Your leader is also struggling too in this time of crisis.
I have to say, I have to agree with that, Louie. No? Kasi yung leaders nyo, imagine these guys, yung leaders ninyo's organization, they get the least amount of praise. And even just a short note saying, boss, appreciate what you did. They hardly get those kinds of things. And yet they get subjected to a lot of pressure and stress on a daily basis. Now, sometimes naman may kita mo pag medyo pagod na yung boss mo, di ba? Medyo naman, give them a little pat on the back or maybe, shorten the meeting for a while or give them some piece of good news instead of all bad news. Di ba? Tao rin naman ang mga leaders and we need to be cognizant of the fact that they also need, some, I would say, ano bang magandang word doon? Some, yung parang ano lang, again, go back to your word na lang, pat on the back or some good news every now and then.
And since this topic naman is leadership in a time of crisis, bro, leadership is not just country manager, managing director, or CEO role. Leadership can actually be displayed by anyone in the team.
No, definitely what we're talking about here is applicable down to the frontline leaders. No? It's not just for the GMs and CEOs. What I'm talking about, what Louis is sharing and I am sharing is very applicable to any leadership level.
So yes, please motivate, boost the morale, praise, encourage, show gratitude man lang sa
I think that was the word I was thinking about. Gratitude, I think, is the right word.
Kasi kung crisis, in a leadership team, whether ano ba yan, the district sales manager yan, diba?
Yeah.
O meron kang NSM, meron kang mga VPs, no? It's not the title that counts, no?
Yes.
And,
yes.
Bro, kanina sabi mo, balancing people and profits, no, or business and people. Perhaps a good segue to the usual pitfalls of leaders during this time of crisis. What have you seen in others? Or perhaps you can also relate to when you were managing before and you realize it's a pitfall. What could be a common trap of leaders pag nasa gitna ng crisis?
I would say I've done this before. That's why I've learned from my mistake. No, sometimes as leaders, we try to use the same leadership techniques and styles. When times are good, we use it during when times are bad, and it's really very easy to be a leader when times are good, right? And I guess you could agree with me. Sales is coming, everybody's happy. But when a problem comes or a crisis comes, sometimes ang naging problema natin, hindi tayo nakapag-adjust sa crisis. Ano ibig sabihin? For example, very simple. Pre-crisis, hindi pa work from home, we used to manage, half-day meetings. Ngayon, ginagawa pa rin natin. Can you imagine 4 hours of people in Zoom? Kawawa naman sila. Yung sakit ng mata nila, and it's harder to understand each other when you're doing a Zoom meeting or a Google Meets,
May mga
whatever, no?
internet, connections pa, no?
Oh, hindi naman lahat ng tao 75 Mbps or 100 Mbps ang connection. So, let's be mindful as leaders. Gawin na naman natin. Don't do more than 1 hour. That's my personal tip. 45 minutes to 1 hour max. How do you do that? Do send pre-reads. Have email exchanges. Para pagdating ng meeting, you just decide. Of course, you also say hello and kumustahin yung isa't isa. But wag na kayong wag kayong magkwentuhan sa Zoom. Zoom is not for kwentuhan. Ngayon, kung nag-iinuman kayo, okay lang. Pero kung trabaho, maawa naman kayo sa mga tao. Maawa rin kayo sa sarili nyo. That's number one. So that's a very practical example of how we need to be more flexible during a time of crisis like this. I would also share that, sometimes another pitfall is nung walang crisis, and then when times are good, we decide, ganun na kabilis, decisive tayo. Without sometimes getting inputs from your team, especially your leadership team. This is the time to get inputs kasi you're about to make decisions that will really impact the lives of people. So don't be impulsive. Of course, you have your thoughts. You have to discuss and argue with your team. But get their points of view. Baka mamaya, you're not if so alam mo yung saying na if you're the most intelligent person in the room, you're in the wrong room, di ba? That's why you've got people who are experts in HR, finance, supply chain. Get inputs, especially if the decision involves their area of expertise. Don't try to be a supply chain expert when you have a supply chain expert in the team. So that's another pitfall, trying to make all the important decisions by yourself without getting inputs. And the third thing I would say is let's be more focused on soft skills than technical skills. Sometimes leaders always focus on budgets, money, technical knowledge. You need more soft skills during a crisis. Talking about empathy, being more compassionate, having emotion intelligence. These are needed more in a crisis than your intelligence and technical stuff as a leader.
Wow. Number one, adapt your leadership style. And don't get stuck. And number two, meetings. Keep your meetings to 1 hour. I remember one of your posts in LinkedIn is about kiss yata or conciseness. One of your more blockbuster posts recently, in the past 2 months. No?
Right.
And you mentioned pre-reads. Wag mag-brainstorm sa meeting. Magbaon ng ideas. Bring ideas.
Correct.
Clarify the agenda in question so that the meeting is a discussion and not waiting for people's ideas to come out.
Correct.
Ano pa yung sa dulo, yung EQ and soft skills of the leader. Naku, lalabas ngayon, Ian, yung leaders who leaders will really shine. If you have it, you have it. If you also don't, it will also show and it will impact your people.
Definitely. And it's okay if you don't have it. That's why you have to get good people in your team to sort of cover up your gaps. Ganun naman ang team, di ba? Not everyone is an expert in everything. But if you have a strong team, then you're gonna be fine. But to your point, yes, the good leaders shine more during a time of crisis. The bad leaders really come out very bad during a time of crisis.
And the point that you mentioned earlier is also empowering and should lead our listeners to also empower your team. Dati kasi pag crisis, command and control. And there are times when we can do that. But what we're hearing from Ian right now is, top people who are experts in their own respective fields. At kahit sa soft skills, no, bro, no? If you know that you don't have that soft skill, maybe a second layer or the next person below you might become a better communicator.
Correct. Exactly. You don't have to do everything yourself. That's why you have a team. So,
ang ganda nun, you don't have to do everything by yourself. I'm staying with that thought. In times of crisis, you don't have to do everything by yourself.
Exactly kasi, and I felt this also parang, alam mo yung feeling mo buwat-buwat mo yung mundo. It's not supposed to be that way. Otherwise, you're gonna burn out. You learn to learn to leverage on your team during a time of crisis. Of course, you have to make the tough calls as a leader, but I'm pretty sure your people are there willing to support. So ask for their support, right? Be humble enough to ask for help.
Now, here's the thing. What if you realize in the middle of crisis or in the midst of crisis that some people don't have what it takes to contribute to the team in crisis?
So for me, what I usually do kasi number one, parang think about that person not performing well during a time of, abundance. No? You try to mentor and coach. No? Give the person another chance. For me, that's my default. I give the person another chance, but I also help the person. Pero pag talagang hindi kaya, maybe the person is in the wrong organization or in the wrong role. So you have to make a decision where that person goes.
So we're still hearing that balance of people, no? Parang, especially during times of crisis, we have to have that elbow room or allowance to be more compassionate. I think you used that word earlier, no? Baka hindi maka-perform because of the so many things that are happening around us. No?
Correct. And you have to realize, Louie, no, and I'm sure you also feel this. When you're working from home, you're with your family. You're there physically, but emotionally, di ba? You're all over the place. You're mentally all over the place. So you have to realize yung mga tao rin natin are probably in difficult situations. So we need to be more empathetic and understand where they're coming from, what's their situation. That's why for people who have you manage other people, you have this is a perfect time for you to get to know your people better. Without asking, of course, kung ayaw nila mag-share about their family, huwag mo na pilitin. But be more feeling, understand more what their current situation is, so that you can be more effective as a leader.
And it's connected to what you mentioned earlier, yung gathering inputs from people. Because the opposite of that, if you make a decision all by yourself, and ang tricky part sa work from home ngayon, if you decide and people don't want to do it, you will not have any control. Wala ka namang magagawa kung hindi nila susundin, ano?
Exactly. You're just going to be faced with passive resistance.
So get to know your people, get to know them and gather their inputs, no? And we're really hearing a very consultative, very inclusive, very empowering style of Ian. Bro, I'm getting to know more and more of your leadership style as well as we're going through this podcast.
Yeah, and I think naman and even before the crisis, medyo ganito na yung style ko talaga. But I guess what changed lang in my leadership style during a time of crisis is I make more, directive and decisive decisions. Before kasi, I have the luxury of, sige, I'll make you make a bit of mistake so you can learn from it. But now kasi, you have to use your experience when you have to make an important decision. You don't have the luxury of time, diba? Although I am also empowering and trusting. But kung alam ko na hindi mag-work, I already tell them, wag mo na yan gawin. Nasubukan na natin yan before. Let's do this. You have to be more directive, decisive, and fast in making decisions during a crisis.
This point is very powerful as well because I'm now hearing Ian again with the balance, yung concept of balance. Just like earlier, balance of business and balance of people. Now, what we're hearing to our community members, what we're hearing is you have to balance being decisive and gathering inputs from people. Kasi in a time of crisis, as you mentioned, time is of the essence.
Yeah.
And one mistake can be costly and can wipe us all. Ian, what is your advice now with last pieces of advice that we can give when it comes to leading during crisis situations? Advice to your fellow top and senior management and advice that you can give to the frontline people managers who they really feel this, especially I can imagine during these times of crisis, they have to cascade the bad news. No? They have to deliver not so tough ones. So those are two groups of people: top management and frontline managers. Mag-iiba ba ang advice mo for both?
I think I would share two different advice, but I think interchangeable siya, no? So, pero pag top management na isip ko, I would say, kasi minsan if we reach a certain level in or our career organization, minsan feeling natin been there, done that, and we lack, we sometimes lack humility to ask for help and advice from other people, our friends, peers, or even our leadership team. I think this is the time for leaders to be humble enough to admit that you don't have all the answers. We don't have all the answers. We're not Solomon if he had all the answers at all. No, that's just an example. So be humble enough to learn from others, seek help, whether it's people, do online, look at LinkedIn, look at this online podcast. If you learn one thing from this podcast, then it's worth your 45 minutes, whatever. Read books, articles, because sometimes you may not necessarily get the answer you need from that article or book, but it sparks something in your mind. And I'm sure this has happened with you as well, Louis. Parang, teka lang, bigla ko naalala to. Bakit ko to ginagawa? All because you read something new na nabalik sa iyo, tama, hindi ko naisip to before. Alam mo yan? So now is not the time to just think about ano ba yung experience ko ginawa ko before. Maybe you need to learn something new because this crisis is a new thing. Nobody in the world has ever gone to this kind of crisis, right? So that would be my advice to top management, and I would add on to that yung binanggit ko kanina, take care of yourself physically, mentally. Otherwise, you will not be able to lead effectively. For frontliners, I mentioned this earlier, get to know your people better, be more compassionate, be more empathetic, um, be more empowering, and trust them more. Of course, you have to have accountability of the results you need, di ba? Siyempre, kailangan mo pa i-review yun. But at the end of the day, put yourselves in their shoes. Ano ba yung problema nitong minamanis kaya sa bahay or their health? You cannot lead people the same way, and you know this. Iba-ibang style depending on the situation of the person and the capability, right? So that would be my advice for frontline leaders. And again, these advices are interchangeable between top management and frontline leaders.
You stimulated me to think of how I got to LinkedIn. Again, during that Netflix 2 week Netflix weeknights, I would also sometimes listen to YouTube videos,
There you
and
go.
came across Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah.
And Gary Vaynerchuk mentioned something. If you are in B2B, sabi niya, if you are in B2B and you are not in LinkedIn, you'll be doomed in years' time. Sabi
That's
ko,
right.
I'm in B2B and I'm not in LinkedIn. Sabi ko, makapasok nga sa LinkedIn. And one thing led to another. And this is one. Now we're having you here in our
And
podcast. We
all
met
and,
in LinkedIn.
and all because you watch a YouTube video, correct? For free, by the way.
Yes.
You
Ang
just
ganda
have
yung
to
point
look.
mo kanina eh. Top management, ano? We don't have a ceiling to our learning.
Correct. As long as you keep on learning, you will be successful despite the situation, the environment. As long as you have that openness to learn new things. It's gonna be hard, especially if are at age. I won't ask your age anymore. But sometimes you just have to. Like, I admit, it is the first time I've learned how to use Google Hangouts or Google Sheets. But I know now how to use it, right? So things like that, we have to be open.
I'm sure bro, ang nagturo sa inyan, yung mga younger members ng team mo.
Of course. How else?
Uh,
I will not research on my own.
similar,
But then again,
similar thing.
sometimes you're forced, di ba?
Yes. And one of the things nga, I've been saying is I've never done a webinar in my life in 28 years of speaking. But it was so weird. The first webinar in April 1. First, it was so weird because I'm in the same room. I'm the only one. And I'm talking at the top of my lungs. Sabi ko, this is how it feels pala. No? But then again, it's my younger members of the team who told me, use this platform, just like you, Google Meet, ano ba yan, ano? Hanggang ngayon. No? And thank you to the younger members of our workforce. No?
No. I agree, though. That's why it's always nice to have diversity in the team. Talking about generation diversity, generational diversity, because you learn from each other. I'm sure they're learning a ton from you, from your experience, but I'm also sure you're learning a ton from them about all this new technology, etc. I mean, I'm sure you haven't done podcasts before in your life, correct? Now you're doing it.
Yeah. Yes, yung mga hindi natin pinapansin. Sabi ko nga, yung things that we've done in the last 6 months, a lot of organizations, we've never had that. They've been shelved before. They've been part of the pipeline as good ideas. Now, we're forced to do it. And,
Correct.
bro, as a good closing to this one, uh, how do you see the last quarter of 2020? General view for our other senior leaders out there. How do you see it? And what's one tip for leaders as we go into Q4 next week? Q4 na pala, next
Q4
week.
na. Ako, sa tingin ko, this is me, by observing what's happening around us. No? I think with the relaxing of the lockdowns in a way, no, you can see it naman eh. Consumption is starting to happen. No? Maybe not in pre-pandemic levels, but what's good about what's happening is I think the Filipino population is beginning to learn how to live with this virus. They're becoming more conscious about wearing masks, face shields, using alcohol, etc. So that they could start working normally in a way. Hindi pa 100%. So what I'm seeing that is that Q4 will definitely be much better than Q2 and hopefully better than Q3. What advice I would give for leaders like us or people managing businesses is magplano na kayo ng how you're gonna start Q or 2021 strong. What do I mean by that? Plan for a very strong Q1 2021, right? So whatever that means for you, more initiatives, better use of your resources, training your people, doing things, doing some new things, but use this time to plan so that you have a very very good start for 2021. Because because whether we like it or not, 2020 is gonna be almost over. I'm pretty sure no one's gonna. Maybe very very few companies are gonna hit their targets anyway, right? So maximize nyo na lang yung Q4, whatever you can do for your business. But make sure you start 2021 strong and make sure you have a very strong plan for the full year.
Ganda. Ganda. It can also applies to individuals, no?
Yes.
Also applies to organizations. No? Yung feeling natin, ano ba tong 2020, di ba? Either can we fast track, can we go back to 2019,
Right,
or
right.
can we fast forward to 2021? But
Correct.
yes, I just repeat what Ian said. Prepare for 2021. Upskill, strengthen yourself and your team in this Q4 so you're ready for 2021. Salamat, bro. It's also nice to really see you, at least not in person, but at least this is the best face-to-face, the best that we can do. And to our listeners, this is leadership in time of crisis. Lots of nuggets of wisdom from experienced, seasoned top leader, Ian Santos. So to everyone, Ian, babati lang tayo. Sabay tayo. Subukan natin ng isang hello world greeting.
Hello, world!
Hi everyone, this is Louis Banta, CEO and Chief Trainer of LJMB, or Learning Just Made Better. Thanks for watching my video. To get more videos like this, click subscribe and hit the bell icon below. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment down below, and share this video to others.